Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator, and on this week's Field Friday segment, I wanted to touch on something that we're starting to see a little bit showing up in some of these cornfields. Something we haven't really seen a lot of the last few years, but we're starting to see some Gauss's wilt show up. You can kind of see here we've got some browned up leaves, some diseased leaves here on some of these corn plants here, starting to really show up and get kind of ugly looking in patches. But just wanted to touch on what it is. We've talked about it in past episodes and prior years, but thought I'd do a little refresher on it here. Gauss's wilt is a bacterial disease. That's important because basically our fungicides have no effect on bacterial infections. And so we could have no diseases out here that a fungicide is going to control and still have a lot of this stuff that we're, don't want to see, I guess you'd say, as far as brown diseased tissue. But keep that in mind because we had a lot of fungicide sprayed this year, of course, and some of those fields could have some of this stuff showing up, and it's, the fungicide wasn't going to do anything with it from the get-go. So why are we seeing it some now? Actually, honestly, I'm a little bit surprised that we were seeing it show up earlier. Now that we've had a little bit of rain, I expect it to maybe spread a little bit more, but a couple things have to happen for Gauss's wilt to be really prevalent. I don't know if you can see it here. This is a lesion. There's a little slit here from a little hail damage. You'll see here a leaf that was had some earlier damage. So any damage to a leaf is an entry point. It's just kind of like when you get a cut on your finger, you put some disinfectant on that cut to keep infection out. It's the same thing the corn plant has. If it's got an entry point, there's a chance for disease to get in there. Gauss's wilt also really likes to have some longer periods of leaf wetness. So we've had a lot of humidity, a lot of dewy mornings where that canopy is wet for quite a while during the day. We had some fairly recent cool weather go through where we had some cool mornings, cloudy days. So that canopy stayed wet a long time, and that seems to have allowed Gauss's wilt to kind of get started in a few fields. Gauss's wilt can look like a few other diseases that, especially at the outset. Northern corn leaf blight kind of gets that long cigar looking lesion, kind of like, a little bit like this one maybe looks like here, maybe of a cigar shaped type lesion. There is a difference though. If we look at this picture, I've got a kind of more of a close-up of this leaf. And so if you look at this lesion here, you can kind of see maybe up close, there's a little bit of a shiny, maybe like a varnish-like looking finish to that leaf in a small area. That's bacterial ooze, kind of that, the bacteria in that leaf are oozing out some sticky substance that kind of gives it that shiny look. The northern corn leaf blight does not do that. The other thing you can see with Gauss's wilt, oftentimes you can kind of tell, is it going to continue to expand or is it kind of done? You can see this water-soaked area. We've got a brown area on the leaf that's obviously diseased and dead already, but you can kind of see at the edges of that it's expanding and it just hasn't turned brown yet. So that's kind of one way to tell if it's Gauss's wilt. On the underside of that leaf, sometimes they'll call it a mild freckling look where you got some little black, what looks like freckles, you might say, showing up. That's something you generally don't see with a northern corn leaf blight lesion, but you do with Gauss's wilt. So again, wounds on the leaf are allowing an entry point. This field's had some wind damage, like a lot of them did, where the leaves got busted over a little bit sometimes, or a little bit of hail. It always amazes me every year how many plots and how many fields we walk through that actually had a little bit of hail damage, and nobody ever remembers it hailing in the area, but there is some leaf damage out there, and those, of course, are going to be worse. So a couple things are also important to note about Gauss's wilt. One of our best defenses really is hybrid selection. Hybrid selection is probably our best defense against Gauss's wilt. Some hybrids stop that infection from spreading very well. They won't ever be bulletproof, but you won't see very big lesions once it gets started. It's like it kind of, it consolidates that infection and doesn't let it expand and doesn't let that water-soaked area, like I showed on those other pictures, kind of, show up. There are some hybrids that are more susceptible, and those are the ones that you will see those lesions expand on. Corn on corn is generally worse with Gauss's wilt because this is a residue living disease. So when these leaves end up getting combined and on the ground this fall, they're going to have a more likely chance of infecting that corn next year if this was going to be a corn on corn field. If we get this tilled under and it decays and goes away, then that infection from this particular leaf tissue is gone. So corn on corn is worse, certain hybrids are worse. It's just something to know. So from a yield perspective, what's the ramifications of this? It kind of depends on how much of this damage we have. It's like a lot of diseases, how much leaf area is basically rendered inactive for photosynthesis. This leaf has got a fair amount. Here's a leaf that's got, a fair amount of tissue that's disrupted. This one's maybe not as much yet, although we can see it's expanding a little bit. How much photosynthetic area is lost is going to be dictating, what type of yield impact we might have. Like I say, if a hybrid has the ability to kind of stop infection based on just the way that plant is built genetically, that helps stave off any yield impact. If we have fields that have big pockets or areas where this Gauss's wilt starts to really take over and really start to raise heck, that is a concern late in the fall, because if we have a lot of this leaf tissue disrupted from helping that corn finally finish grain in that ear, we're going to have a cannibalized stock. If that leaf tissue goes away and that plant's trying to finish those kernels and doesn't have the ability to do it from the plant anymore, the only thing it's got to do is cannibalize what nutrients it's stored in that stalk, in that white pith in the center of the stalk. So if it starts to do that, cannibalizing that, just like a lot of times we talk about, that's really going to render standability a problem next, at harvest time here in the next couple months. So it is something to be aware of. It's not everywhere, but it is around more than I've seen for the last couple years. So I wanted to make you aware of it, especially as now, guys are starting to get out and looking at the ears in the fields and seeing how pollination progressed and how things are looking. So just be aware if you're out there and if you see this stuff out there that there's ways to identify what's going on. So with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and I'll see you next week.